Hello GI Joe and 1/18 scale collectors, this is The Human Mechanism. Regardless of how you decided to tailor your GI Joe universe, I think we can all agree that a valuable asset is a tank. They form the heavily armored backbone of a fighting force. In the early days of the 3 3/4 inch line, GI Joe had the MBT-70 inspired Mobat. But today, we are taking a look at a modern GI Joe main battle tank. It was first released around 2003, but it still holds up today. This is the GI Joe Spytroops Patriot Grizzly tank. Whereas the Mobat was based on the MBT-70, the Patriot is most definitely based on the Abrams. The Patriot is unique in that we really haven't seen anything like it since it was released. Where do I begin? Well, let's start with the detailing. For the most part, the molded detailing is abundant, but I feel it's let down due to the lack of paint applications. I think this beast could use a black wash to emphasize the finer details. Another thing holding the Patriot back are the molded treads. Now, this is not uncommon in the GI Joe toy line, and you can argue that the Patriot compensates for it by having electronics. But it's just one of those things that tanks from cheaper toy lines, such as the Power Team Elite Combat Tank, has over its more expensive GI Joe counterparts. But overall, the detailing is superb. Other details include stickers, and usually I'm not a huge fan. However, when it comes to the stickers on the Patriot, there's actually a lot to say. Of course, you have your generic GI Joe stickers, but then you have this upside-down chevron shape. This is actually a real-life application on American tanks, especially during the Gulf War. These chevron shapes were painted with infrared paint so that Allied forces could identify friendly vehicles through thermal imaging, either at night or in less than ideal conditions. This is what I like about GI Joe. They offer fictional vehicles that still have a sense of realism. Other stickers include Wild Bill's name, interesting choice of character. Lastly, you have the Patriot Grizzly sticker, with the word Grizzly as if it were graffitied onto the tank, indicating that Grizzly is not an official designation, but rather an affectionate nickname given by the Joes. Next, we have carrying capacity. There are 8 areas to place figures on pegs. One of them is currently hidden, but we'll get to that later. Of course, being a GI Joe vehicle from the early 2000s, any figures beyond the direct-to-consumer line will not be able to fit onto the pegs. But, hey, nothing says you have to be restrained by the number of pegs. At the front of the tank, there is a space for a driver and a bow gunner. Kind of strange for a modern main battle tank. On the top of the turret, there is a cupola for, what I assume, a commander. Lastly, at the back of the tank, there is an empty space. It has the ability to hold 2 figures, but as you can see, you're probably just going to end up using this space for storage. So, there's a total of 12 spaces for figures, with a total capacity for 13. Now we move on to firepower. First, you have this massive main gun. We'll come back to this later. Next, you have this giant M2 Browning type machine gun on the commander's cupola. Kind of a strange design. The cupola is able to close entirely, but this is prevented by the machine gun. Lastly, you have 2 cannons on each side of the turret. I'm not exactly a fan of these, but looking at this from today's perspective, these could easily be some sort of active protection system. And yes, the radar can rotate and pivot up and down. Now we move on to sounds. Pushing the tank activates engine noises. This can get annoying. Thankfully, there's an on and off switch below the tank in case you don't want to deal with that. Next, a pistol grip can be folded out from behind the tank. The main control is used to rotate the turret, while the small knob rotates the machine gun. And last but not least, the trigger on the control fires missiles from the main gun, which are loaded into what I've called the autoloader. As cool as this mechanism is, it prevents the turret from rotating a complete 360 degrees, at least not without an eruption, and I definitely don't have the stomach to try it. The GI Joe Spytroops Patriot Grizzly tank is a solid piece. It was so good, in fact, that it saw service into the Valor vs. Venom line, and was released as the Night Force Grizzly tank, and being repainted with a woodland camouflage color scheme. Unfortunately, this version of the Patriot is depressingly rare, and the ones that show up on eBay, especially ones that are still in the box, command outrageous prices. So, needless to say, getting my hands on one took a lot of patience. Personally, I think the woodland camouflage color scheme fits the Patriot a lot better. I guess it just depends on what scenario you want to use the tank for. Unlike the Spytroops Patriot, the Valor vs. Venom version came with the Wild Bill figure. Again, interesting considering he's a helicopter pilot. Even though the Valor vs. Venom Patriot Grizzly is a rare find and is highly desired, if you already own the Spytroops Patriot, I'm struggling to say that you're missing much. Don't get me wrong, the color scheme on the Valor vs. Venom Patriot is a much better fit. But at the end of the day, it's just the same Grizzly with a different color scheme. So if you can only choose one, definitely go for the Valor vs. Venom Patriot, but if you already own the Spytroops version, and unless you're a completist, I wouldn't stress over getting one all that much. So, with that said, this is the Human Mechanism, and the Patriot Grizzly tank from both lines has the Human Mechanism's seal of approval. See you all later.